The rain fell in relentless sheets over Manhattan, turning the streets into mirrors that shimmered with reflections of headlights and neon. Umbrellas fought against the wind, taxis hissed through puddles, and the air smelled of wet asphalt and distant coffee. Ethan Morgan pressed his palm against the cafe door, stepping inside with a shiver. His wool coat was soaked at the edges, his hair damp and messy from the storm. The soft chime above the door cut through the jazz playing in the background, and for a moment, the warmth inside felt like an escape from the chaos outside. He glanced around. The place was nearly empty, only a few scattered customers hiding from the rain. A barista wiped down the counter, humming quietly to herself. Ethan found a seat near the window, where raindrops streaked down the glass like tiny rivers. He ordered black coffee, opened his laptop, and tried to focus on his presentation for the next morning. But his mind wasn't there. It hadn't been for weeks. At 38, Ethan's life looked perfect on paper. A senior architect at a well-known firm, a stable marriage, an apartment overlooking the East River. But lately perfection felt hollow. His marriage with Olivia had turned quiet. Not angry, not broken, just silent. They spoke in schedules, shared space but not laughter. The spark had faded, and he didn't know when it happened. He rubbed his eyes and stared out at the rain, his thoughts heavy and unspoken. Then she walked in. Clara. He didn't know her name yet. But the moment she entered, something shifted. She carried the storm with her, hair damp, coat clutched tightly, cheeks flushed from the cold. She paused by the door, scanning the cafe for an empty seat. Her umbrella dripped a small puddle onto the floor. There was only one empty table left, the one beside Ethan. She hesitated, then smiled politely. Is this seat taken? Ethan looked up from his screen. No, go ahead. She sat down, unwrapping her scarf, her hands trembling slightly from the cold. When the barista came by, she ordered chamomile tea and let out a long sigh. It's really coming down out there, she said softly, mostly to herself. Ethan smiled faintly. New York rain, dramatic as always. That made her laugh, a small honest sound that cut through the dull hum of the cafe. They sat in silence for a while. He returned to his laptop, or at least pretended to. She took out a book, though her eyes wandered often to the window, lost in thought. It was only when lightning flashed that they both looked up at the same time, eyes meeting for a brief, electric moment. She smiled. I think the city looks prettier when it rains. Ethan tilted his head. Most people would disagree. I know, she said, her voice calm. But when it rains, everyone slows down. You notice things, reflections, faces, sounds. It's like the city finally breathes. Her words lingered. Ethan closed his laptop halfway. That's actually true. I used to walk in the rain when I lived in Chicago, she added. People thought it was weird. But I liked feeling small next to something so big and uncontrollable. He chuckled. Maybe you just like chaos. Maybe, she said with a soft grin. What about you? You look like someone who prefers control. That made him pause. Guilty. Work. Architecture. And you? Photography, she said. Mostly freelance. People, moments, places that feel forgotten. They talked easily after that. About the city, about work, about how coffee shops felt like small islands in a sea of noise. Ethan found himself laughing more than he had in weeks. There was something about her, the way she listened without interrupting, the way she spoke with quiet certainty, the way she noticed small things like the sound of the rain hitting metal awnings. At one point, Clara glanced at his wedding ring. Her expression didn't change, but Ethan caught the flicker of understanding in her eyes. She didn't ask about it and he didn't explain. But the air shifted, not uncomfortable, just heavier, more fragile. Does your wife like New York rain too? She asked eventually, her tone casual but careful. Ethan hesitated. She used to, he said softly. Now, I'm not sure. We don't talk about things like that anymore. Clara nodded slowly, tracing the rim of her teacup. That sounds lonely. It is, he admitted before he could stop himself. Silence filled the space between them, not awkward, just honest. Outside, thunder rolled across the skyline. The cafe lights flickered for a second, and the barista announced they'd be closing early because of the storm. Clara looked out the window. The subway's probably flooded by now. Yeah, Ethan said. You live nearby? Upper West Side. You. Brooklyn. She sighed. So we're both stranded. Ethan looked at her for a long moment, the storm outside painting reflections across her face. Seems that way. The barista handed them paper cups with their drinks to go. We're shutting down in 15, she said apologetically. Clara stood, tightening her coat. I guess I'll try to find a cab. Ethan followed her to the door. The wind howled as they stepped outside, rain slashing sideways, umbrellas flipping inside out. It was chaos, wild, beautiful, and impossible. No cab stopping in this, Ethan shouted over the noise. Clara laughed, her hair whipping around her face. You're right. So what now? There's a diner across the street, he said, pointing. Still open. They ran across the crosswalk, dodging puddles, half drenched by the time they reached the other side. The diner was nearly empty, warm light glowing against the storm. They slid into a booth near the window, laughing breathlessly as they caught their breath. This feels like a movie, Clara said, smiling as she wiped rain from her face. Yeah, Ethan said, his heart still racing. Only with worse lighting. They ordered pancakes and coffee. Comfort food for strangers in a storm. The rain outside drummed against the windows like a steady heartbeat. Clara talked about photography again. How she loved capturing people when they didn't know they were being seen. That's when you get the truth, she said. The moments people think no one's watching. That's who they really are. Ethan stared at her, his voice low. What do you see right now? She met his gaze, thoughtful. Someone who's trying very hard to remember who he used to be. He exhaled, his throat tight. That's painfully accurate. Clara smiled sadly. Then maybe tonight isn't a coincidence. They lingered long after their plates were empty, the conversation deepening, about regrets, about choices, about how people change slowly, almost invisibly, until one day they don't recognize their own reflection. The rain never stopped. It only softened, turning the city into a blur of gold and silver lights. When midnight approached, Ethan checked his phone, 3 missed calls from Olivia. He didn't open them. He just turned the screen face down on the table. Clara noticed but said nothing. She only whispered, "You should go." "I know," he said. But he didn't move. For a long time they sat in silence watching the rain. Something fragile and dangerous hung in the air. The kind of moment where one wrong word could change everything. Ethan finally stood, slipping on his coat. "Let me at least get you a cab." Outside, the storm had calmed to a drizzle. They stood by the curb under the same umbrella, the city quiet around them. A taxi slowed down. Clara turned to him. "Thank you. For the coffee. For the company." He nodded. "Thank you for reminding me what real conversation feels like." She smiled, eyes glimmering under the streetlight. "Maybe someday when it rains again we'll run into each other." "Maybe," he said. She got into the cab. He watched the taillights disappear into the night until they faded completely. The rain started again, soft, rhythmic, endless. Ethan stood there for a moment longer, feeling the weight of something unnamed settle in his chest. He walked home slowly, the city alive around him. Somewhere between guilt and wonder, between loneliness and connection, he realized he would remember this night forever. Not because of what happened, but because of what almost did. The city was quieter the next morning, as if the rain had washed away its noise. Sunlight streamed through Ethan's apartment window, falling across the kitchen table where his phone still lay face down, screen dark. Olivia moved around the kitchen in her robe, silent except for the clink of cups. She didn't ask where he had been the previous night. She didn't have to. Her eyes had questions, but her lips stayed still. The same uneasy silence that had filled their marriage for months. Ethan sat opposite her, pretending to read the newspaper. He could feel the faint scent of Clara's perfume still clinging to his coat, the ghost of laughter in his memory. He hated that part of him didn't want to forget. "Did you work late again?" Olivia finally asked, her tone careful. "Yeah," he said, the lie tasting bitter. The storm slowed everything down. She nodded, not believing, not arguing. Just nodding. They ate in silence. The sound of spoons and the hum of the refrigerator filled the space between them. A space that used to hold conversation, laughter, and the small gestures of two people who cared enough to notice each other. When Olivia left for her yoga class, Ethan leaned against the counter, rubbing his temples. His reflection in the kitchen window looked older than he remembered. Tired, guilt-ridden, and strangely hollow. He thought about texting Clara. Just a simple "Did you get home safe?" He typed it twice, deleted it twice. By the third time, he threw his phone onto the couch. He told himself that last night was just a moment. A single, strange, beautiful, dangerous moment that didn't need to mean more than it did. But he knew that was a lie. At work, the day crawled. Every sound, the murmur of colleagues, the hum of printers, the clatter of keyboards, felt distant. Ethan stared at his computer screen, the rain-washed city outside his window gleaming in the sunlight. He was supposed to finalize design layouts for the upcoming hotel project. Instead, he found himself sketching something else. The outline of a face, soft eyes, the curve of a smile he shouldn't remember as clearly as he did. By lunch, he'd stopped pretending to work. He stepped outside, walking aimlessly through the streets, hands in his pockets, coat collar turned up. The air was sharp, the smell of wet pavement still heavy. He found himself back near the cafe from the night before. It was almost empty again. He took the same seat by the window. The rain had stopped, but the memory of it lingered like perfume in the air. He half hoped, half feared she'd walk in again. She didn't. That night, Olivia made dinner. Spaghetti and wine, his favorite. She lit a candle, small effort to bridge the widening gap between them. "How was work?" she asked. "Busy," he said automatically. She smiled faintly. "When was the last time we actually sat like this?" He looked up, startled by her honesty. "It's been a while," he admitted. "I miss it," she said softly. "I miss us." The words hit harder than he expected. For a long moment he couldn't speak. "I do too," he said finally. And he meant it. But the truth underneath was uglier. He missed her, yes, but he also missed the version of himself that existed when love was easy. Before routine, before distance, before the night that had split him in two. Olivia reached across the table, her hand brushing his. "Maybe we just need to find our way back." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "Maybe." But somewhere in his chest he felt the echo of Clara's voice saying, "Maybe tonight isn't a coincidence." And that echo didn't fade. Weeks passed. The storm became a story people mentioned in passing. That crazy night the subways flooded, remember? And then forgot. But Ethan didn't forget. He started noticing photography exhibits in gallery windows. He began taking longer walks at lunch, often pausing near the same street corners where street photographers lingered. One Friday afternoon, as he crossed Fifth Avenue, he stopped. A small art gallery had a sign outside. "Fragments of the City," a solo exhibit by Clara Hayes. He froze. For a moment he told himself to keep walking. But curiosity, guilt, and something unnamed pulled him through the door. The space was quiet, the smell of fresh paint and rain lingering faintly. Dozens of photographs lined the walls, all in black and white. Faces in windows, reflections on puddles, silhouettes of strangers walking under umbrellas. And then he saw it. A photograph taken through a rain-streaked cafe window. 2 cups of coffee. A man with tired eyes looking down at his hands. A faint reflection of a woman across from him, barely visible but unmistakably there. The title beneath read, "What Almost Was." Ethan's heart pounded. He stood frozen, staring at it, unable to move. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said beside him. He turned. Clara stood there, arms crossed loosely, eyes calm but unreadable. He swallowed hard. "You took this." "I did," she said. "You looked lost that night." "I was. I think we both were," she said quietly. They stood there in silence, the city noise faint beyond the glass walls. "You didn't call," she said finally. "I wanted to," he admitted. 100 times. "Why didn't you?" "Because it would have meant something I'm not supposed to want." She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "That's honest." He smiled weakly. "You could have called too." "I thought about it," she said. "But then I remembered the look on your face when you saw your phone light up. You already had someone waiting for you." Her voice trembled slightly, though her posture remained steady. I didn't want to be the reason she stopped smiling. The words hit him like a confession wrapped in kindness. "Does she still smile?" Clara asked. He looked away. "Not as often." They stood there for what felt like forever. Two people bound by a moment they could never claim. Clara finally broke the silence. You should go home, Ethan. She's waiting for you. Even if she doesn't know how to say it. He nodded, throat tight. And you? I'll keep walking, she said with a soft smile. Maybe take more pictures when it rains. He wanted to say something, anything, but every word felt like it would only make goodbye harder. So he just whispered, "Thank you." For what? She asked. For reminding me that I'm still capable of feeling. Her eyes softened. Then don't waste that. Feeling is rare. He left the gallery with a heavy heart. The photograph burned into his memory. Outside, it had started drizzling again, light, hesitant drops that painted small circles on the pavement. Ethan walked slowly toward the subway. He thought about Olivia, about the small candle on the dinner table, about the way her hand had lingered on his that night. Maybe it wasn't too late to start again. When he got home, Olivia was sitting by the window watching the rain. She looked up as he entered. "You're late," she said softly. "I went for a walk," he replied. "In the rain." He smiled faintly. "It's beautiful when it rains." Something in his tone made her pause. Then slowly she smiled. A real one this time, fragile but genuine. He sat beside her. For a long time neither spoke. The city outside glowed in wet light, the sound of rain gentle against the glass. Ethan reached for her hand, and to his relief she didn't pull away. They sat like that, quiet, still listening. The storm no longer felt like chaos. It felt like cleansing. Somewhere in another part of the city, Clara walked with her camera, capturing reflections of lights in puddles. Maybe she thought of him. Maybe she didn't. But the photograph of that night, what almost was, stayed on the gallery wall. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful connections are the ones that never cross the line. And as the rain whispered against the glass, Ethan closed his eyes and let the sound fill the silence between him and the woman he'd promised to love. The storm had passed, but its memory, soft, haunting, eternal, would stay with him forever.